What's up, my dudes? I'm back, bitches. Sorry for not uploading in a while, but my life has been very busy the past few months. I do have a lot of stuff to make videos on still, like, we're not done at all. There would be so much I could talk about theoretically, but I'm just not finding the time to do it. But today I did find some time, so I'm finally bringing you the next guide from my 101 series. Now, you guys might know the term map control. It's a terrorist side term that your IGL might use to describe what he wants his team to do, which is getting map control, right? However, most decent teams seem to have no idea what kind of map control they want to achieve, so they just split up around the map, and the strategy basically consists of 5 players lurking for themselves. Map control originates, as most of the things I teach you in my videos, from CSGO, and that's called a default. And I'm gonna call the concept a default in this video as well. In CSGO, the default is not just something that an IGL calls between a rush B and rush A. It is actually the most important strat for every terrorist team. It's not any different in standoffs, so if you want to become a good team, you need to master your defaults. CT is obviously default 2, which is just their normal setup, right? But I'll focus on T-side defaults here. In this video, I will explain what the goals of a default are, why it is the most important T-side strat, how you can set it up as an IGL, and develop a default example on Sandstone. Hope this helps. Enjoy! Now, before we do anything else, let's first determine the goals of a default. There are multiple goals a default has, which can be getting crucial map control, gaining info on the CT setup and feed that info to your IGL, counter CT aggression, bait out utility. And all of this will have the effect that your late round options will increase. Due to all the map control and info, you will be able to transform your default into a possibly very effective execute. And execute is basically a coordinated bomb site take. Now, why is the default so important? The default is the most versatile strategy in your playbook. You work the whole map, which means you're putting pressure on the whole enemy team, and they will have a hard time reading what your game plan is. A default lets you get to know how the CTs like to play. This means you learn what spots they like to play, what utility they throw, which areas of the map they defend very poorly, etc. You can use this knowledge to develop anti-strats further into the game. If you want to execute mid-round after you default, you can do that off all the info and map control that you have gained in the round during the default, meaning your IGL can make much better decisions that are more likely to win you the round. You should have at least one, but in the best case multiple defaults per map, so the enemy team has a hard time even reading the way you default. When should I default, you might ask? Since it's so important, you should play some variation of your default in most rounds of the half, especially in the first rounds after the pistol round to get to know your enemy. But don't forget to change it up with early round executes to make them paranoid. If your early round B execute works well, do it again to see if they can counter it. If they do, go back to your default to make them adapt again. This way, they will always have to worry about a lot of different things you might do, which will help you. Now, when you as an IGL want to set up your default, there's 2 primary questions you have to ask yourselves. Question number 1, what goals do I want to achieve? Those goals could be map control, info, etc. And question number 2, how many resources, which are players, utility, etc., do I want to dedicate to achieving those goals? Then, after you define that for yourself, you will have to build one of 2 types of default. There are generally those 2 types, which are a passive default or an aggressive default. A passive default is designed to bait out utility and counter CT aggression. In a passive default, you're holding passive angles and slowly try to get map control. In an aggressive default, on the other hand, you're getting early map control in a certain area with 2 or 3 people, oftentimes, and the rest holds other areas passively. Then also, when you have that figured out, you will need to think about protocols. Protocols are small threads within your default, or any bigger thread for that matter, that are supposed to counter certain enemy plays. As an IGL, you can develop these protocols to make your default as hard to counter as possible. After getting the intended map control, the IGL will call either a more or different map control that he wants to take, or an execute that he wants to do mid-round. Now, as an example, I want to create a default on Sandstone. This default is going to be rather an aggressive default, and it's going to be a bit more A-heavy. First of all, we need to determine the goals of our default. My goal is to increase my mid-round options. After my initial default, I want to be able to execute onto both bomb sites and have the freedom to rotate in between them. Due to the spawn timings, T's get control of square and bottom belong basically for free. So if we have a player holding onto this control from nest or from wherever, we will be able to execute onto B basically any time. It's different with A though. We cannot execute onto A side without full control of one of the most important parts of the map, which is apartments. Without apartments control, we can only really go B, which will limit our options immensely, especially if the CTs know that we have no map control towards A and decide to stack B because of that. Lastly, we also want to keep bottom mid control so we can rotate effectively mid-round. So now we already know what map control we want. We want to get and keep control of bottom belong, square, and also bottom mid. We also want full apps control so we can theoretically execute onto A anytime. The next step is determining the resources we want to commit at which parts of the map. Towards square and belong, we need 2 or 3 players depending on how aggressive the CTs might get towards this part of the map. One of them has to make sure that no CT can go aggressive on mid as well. The rest of the players, 2 or 3 depending on how aggressive the enemy team's A setup is, should work together to get apps control. But before we talk about taking apps control, I want to introduce a little protocol, which is a small thread to counter a certain enemy play. You don't need to use this protocol every round, but when the certain enemy play happens, you obviously want to be prepared to counter that. In our case, that enemy play would be that some CT teams like to get really aggressive here in Garden with multiple players early round, which really has the potential to make your life painful. So we obviously don't want that to happen, right? And a way we could counter this kind of stuff is to have a player ready to throw a Garden flash. That flash could, for example, be line up like this. From trash, you stand against this wall and just aim at this corner with your flash and normally throw. That flash is gonna land up here, up there, and will blind anyone who's pushing out Garden. Even if they're over here already, they will still be blind. If the guy who throws the flash has 1 or 2 teammates with him on A, they can peek Garden off of that flash. So yeah, if he throws the flash, the teammates can peek Garden off of that, and if the flash is timed correctly, the pushing CTs will be fully blind. The same player who throws the flash could also throw an underpass smoke, which is lined up like this. You stand against the same corner, look for this cloud formation here and aim all the way up till you hit this cloud and just normally throw. Not that special of a lineup, and that smoke is going to land in underpass here. This smoke will isolate the pushing CTs from any support players behind them on A short, and also will help us in a moment to get apps control. Now there's different ways you can get apps control, but I'll give you an example with 2 A players. The one who throws the underpass smoke from here, like this, goes apps, and his teammate who peeked off the flash earlier, when the flash landed, the teammate peeked and cleared Garden, is gonna go Garden as well. After clearing balcony, the apps player clears the kitchen angle from window, like this, and then slowly walks up kitchen. Due to the underpass smoke, which remember is landing over here, the second guy can cross garden and walk up kitchen stairs where he clears kitchen together with his teammate. Ideally you do all of this silently so the CTs don't know how much resources you actually spent on this control, or ideally don't even know you have apps control. Obviously that smoke is going to be a little bit sus, but if you have apps cleared, that's definitely worth it. Now, since taking apps control was the primary goal of your default, this concludes this thread, and from here on your IGL will make a mid-round call based on your team's map control and gathered info. If your apps take was successful, he might bring your other teammates over to execute onto A. And if it was shut down, you might need to give up that part of the map and try to break through on lane or on B long. If your apps take gets shut down consistently, you might need to take a tactical timeout to discuss anti-threats for the CT's setup. Now, as we saw, the default is an incredibly important concept, and if you and your team want to play at the highest level of competition, you need to develop strong defaults. I hope this video helped you with that. I'm not 100% sure when I can make my next guide, but when we reach 100 subs in the not too far future, hopefully, I will try to get an extra big one out to thank you guys this far. Anyway, I hope this helped, and peace out.